What is up, everybody? Welcome to Football Diehards, looking into Week 12 this week. And I'm here with Emil, as always. I usually have Jamie, but Jamie is out of town. Emil, what is up? Are you looking forward to this slate?
Yes, I am. Can't wait to start going through these and figuring out a few lineups. Did okay last week. I'm starting to try and play a few more as we progress into the second half of the season. So, yeah, ready to rock and roll.
Yep, it was a fun Thanksgiving slate for sure. Looking forward to Sunday. Today, we're going to go through the game by game here, as always, talk some ownership along the way, talk some strategy. I say we get right into it, and we'll start with the first game of the week. And we have the Jets going against the Texans, and I'll kick this one off. Not a ton of interest in this game. I guess the one guy I'm looking at on Houston would be Brandon Cooks. He is 5,800, averaging 14.3 points per game. Had kind of an off week last week, only 3.8 DraftKings points, 3 targets, 2 receptions. He'd be the one guy I look at on the Houston side. And on the Jets side, I think Carter is out, so Dante Johnson is 4,300. I think he's interesting. We've seen that. He has a lot of targets throughout the year. 8 targets in Week 10. He had 6 targets in Week 8. 7 in Week 6. So I think Dante Johnson would be like somebody I'm looking on the Jets. But honestly, this is a game that I'm not too interested in, kind of a low-scoring game more than likely. But those would be the kind of 2 guys I'm looking at there. Any guys that you like in this game?
Well, it's kind of a weird game because you got the quarterback Wilson back. He's been out for a while. He's a rookie. He's had a chance to look at these other quarterbacks like White, who is a nobody, play pretty well. So perhaps this guy is going to learn a little bit, but it's still a scary thing. Kind of like Elijah Moore. He's a guy who's tempting to start for the Jets. What is he? 5,600 salary on DraftKings. So I'm going to look at him. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up playing him. He's at 6.2% owned, the 18th owned wide receiver. And, that's definitely a tempting thing for me.
Yep, Wilson, I'm not too impressed with the guy. I guess that would be the only thing that does concern me. But, yeah, I think he's interesting for sure. Crowder's also pretty cheap, 4,700. But, yeah, not a game I'm, too interested in.
And by the way, Brandon Cooks is at 15% owned, the 5th most owned receiver. So a lot of people are looking at him with Tyrod Taylor, that is, throwing the ball to him.
Oh, wow, 15%. Yeah, I thought more people might.
That's high.
Yeah, it is for sure. I thought more people might be off of him after kind of an off game last week, but I think it's a really good bounce back spot here against the Jets.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, but not too much interest in this game. We'll move on to the next one. I have a ton more interest in this one. We have the Buccaneers going against the Colts. I guess we'll start on the Buccaneers side. And, a lot sticks out. So, for quarterbacks this week, it's weird. There's really not a ton of options I like, but Tom Brady is the most expensive quarterback on the slate. I think he's definitely fine. Do like the matchup against the Colts there. As far as the wide receivers, we're going to be missing Antonio Brown. So, Chris Godwin, 7,000, probably one of my favorite wide receiver plays on the entire slate. And then also Mike Evans, 7,200. So I'm really invested in those guys this week. Not going to get to Leonard Fournette. There are some other guys that like at the running back position more. The Colts are pretty good at stopping the run, and he is a little bit too expensive for my liking. So I'm going to be all over the Buccaneers wide receivers there with Godwin and Evans. And then as far as Rob Gronkowski, I like him a lot as well. He's 4,400. This price really makes no sense to me. When he has been healthy and playing this year, he's been looking good. 14.3 DraftKings points. He has 4 touchdowns on the year, and I think he's only played 4 or 5 games. So, I really do like Rob Gronkowski and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans this week. Anything you like on the Buccaneers side, or you like those guys as well?
Those are really good. I'll flip real quick. Brady right now is the number 1 owned quarterback, 15%. Gronk, it's kind of, you want to sit here and say, until AB gets back, Antonio Brown, you can take advantage. You want to take advantage of that situation where he is not playing, and you've mentioned all those. And Gronk is an interesting one. He's gotten a game in, looked okay. Definitely Brady goes to him, especially inside the 20, inside the red zone, inside the 10 zone at the goal line. So he's a tempting guy to look at. Of course, we'll see what other tight ends we like as we progress, but those all make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, what I noticed looking at the ownership is it looks like, Brady's the highest owned quarterback, Godwin's up there in ownership as well, and I think Gronk is the highest owned tight end. So a lot of people are on these Bucs this week.
It's a hot situation, but as a cash situation, we want to take advantage of that.
Yep, for sure. But yeah, I really do like all those guys. As far as the Colts here, I think Jonathan Taylor is interesting, right? Like we talked about it last week, me and Jamie, how nobody was playing Jonathan Taylor. He was coming in at like the 18th projected highest owned running back. I played him at 5%. I didn't get as much as I wanted of him, but still, he went out there against the Buffalo Bills, who had the #1 run defense in terms of DraftKings points given up, and nobody wanted to play him. Everybody was scared of playing him, and he went out there and he scored 56.4 DraftKings points. He had 5 touchdowns. And they priced him up to 9,100 here against another great run defense in the Buccaneers. But the problem with the Buccaneers is their run defense is really good, but they do give up points to running backs in terms of the passing game. So I think it could be used in that right, and it doesn't even matter. I mean, the Bills, everybody thought their run defense was phenomenal, and it is. But Jonathan Taylor went out there and just destroyed him. So I think he's probably matchup proof here. 9,100. I don't mind Jonathan Taylor, but the only problem is, unlike last week, I'm assuming he's going to get a ton more ownership, right?
Yeah, he's #2 owned, 16%, which is it's kind of backwards. It's kind of like this lagging, thing when he has everybody thought he wasn't going to have a great game. He had one of the best games he's had all year, and now he's going up against one of the toughest running defenses in Tampa Bay. But he can catch the ball, and I'm sure they're going to scheme, and I bet he's going to balance that out or unbalance that out and catch a lot of balls, which means you also may be able to consider a prop bet, as we don't talk about prop bets, but there's probably a prop bet out there on receiving for Jonathan Taylor that may be interesting to throw in there too. He's kind of hard not to play. $9,100. Is it getting too expensive yet, do you think, Jason, or not?
It could be. I mean, last week he was 8,300. The week before he was 8,100. He was 7,900 in week 9, 7,200 in week 8. So yeah, it's definitely getting up there. And then you do factor in the ownership. You factor in the matchup. It could be. It could be. I'm not as high on Jonathan Taylor this week, but you can't deny that he's in play every week at this point.
Well, as we go through the rest of the games, we'll hit some of the other running backs and kind of compare the salary. I'm sure we'll talk about McCaffrey here, and we'll go through that a little bit and kind of compare the two and see which one would be a favorable play this year or this week.
Yeah, for sure. Taylor's getting up into that McCaffrey pricing at this point. I mean, this guy, he's looked phenomenal as of late. He hasn't had a bad game since week 3, which is crazy.
I just love watching him. I got him in a handful of season long when I had the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th pick in these leagues, and I got Taylor a lot in the late first round, and that's worked out pretty well.
Oh, I bet. But, yeah, so Taylor on the Colts, and then I guess the other guy I'd look at would be Michael Pittman Jr., 5,600, averaging 15.4 DraftKings points per game. I think he'd be the other guy I do like, but for me on the Colts, it's probably, Taylor for the most part, but I don't mind some Pittman in there.
Pittman, #4 ranked wide receiver, 15%, so he's up there. People are thinking the same thing. Pascal is at the 22nd owned. Hilton's way down at 36. Is there? Yeah, I haven't really thought it out. I mean, Nyheim Hines, who's a pass-catching back, is the 22nd owned running back at 3.9%. This guy, you never know. This guy could be the guy who has that game because of the run defense of Tampa Bay. Maybe they put him out there a little bit more. I'm not saying I predict that, but there's the numbers. He's a low-owned running back who catches the ball against a team that we've talked about. The defense fits him well.
Yep, makes sense. There's been a couple of games this year where Hines, out of nowhere, has had a decent game. So it could be.
And he's done that in the past too. He's had huge games in the past. Of course, Jonathan's playing so well, maybe that doesn't happen, but it's worth noting.
Yep, for sure. Was there anybody else that stuck out to you in this game?
Those are the ones. I really don't. The tight end position for Indianapolis is kind of so spread out, it's kind of hard to throw buddy out there, but there is the weak Tampa Bay defense. I don't know who really. Mo Alley Cox or Doyle just seems to be kind of old. I like the guy, but I think it's kind of over for him.
Yeah, I think so as well. But we'll keep moving on to the next game. And we have the Eagles going against the Giants. I guess we'll start on the Giants side. So we have Tony, who is listed as doubtful, Shepard, who is out. That leaves us with Galladay, 5,100. Slayton, 4,900. Yeah, I don't mind some Galladay at that price tag, with all the injuries. And then at tight end, I actually have some interest in Evan Ingram. So we see that Kyle Rudolph is listed as doubtful. So you should be getting the majority of the tight end work, and then also the Eagles have given up the most DraftKings points to opposing tight ends. So great matchup. I know Evan Ingram is somebody that's very frustrating, a guy that does drop the ball a lot at times, but he's cheap, 3,800. There's a great matchup, so I think Evan Ingram is a guy that I do have some interest in due to the price tag. And then also Barkley's listed as questionable. He's expected to play. I think he's very interesting at 6,300. I guess the concern is, how much is he going to be used? Last week only 6 carries, but he had 6 targets. But if he comes out here and gets, 15 plus carries, a couple targets mixed in there at this price tag, it could look like a steal. But how much do you think Barkley's going to be used this week?
Well, it's the 6th most owned running back, 11%. So people are considering that. And like you said, it's that mixture of rushing and passing that's always been fun about Barkley. And, like you said, he had 6 targets or 6 catches last week. I forget which one you said. It's a risk, but he's still fairly high owned. And it's against Philadelphia. I'm hoping. I worry about the questionable, but he did play last week, so I do think he's an attractive play. That's for sure. And who did we just mention before? My brain's so tired. Ingram is excellent. He's an excellent opportunity. The guy scares the crap out of us all for how many years we just get annoyed by this guy. 5th most owned tight end this week, 8.9%. Like you said, everything's focused there. $3,800 is about as low as you can get. I think just looking at the ownership down at the 8th, Jared Cook for the Chargers is at $3,000. So that's a pretty low number, 38%. So that's a very attractive situation there for Evan Ingram.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So Ingram, yeah, I do like him quite a bit. Yeah, Barkley's interesting, especially taking a look at the price tag. This is the cheapest he's ever been this year. We started out the year 7,800, and yeah, he's now 6,300. So I think he's interesting. I had a tough matchup last week against Tampa Bay. Much better matchup this week. So I think Barkley's somebody that I don't mind. As far as the Eagles side, yeah, not a ton sticks out. I think Goddard's in play as always. He has 4,800. For me, I'm going to be paying, down a little bit more to guys like Gronk. There's another guy at tight end I do like, and then Evan Ingram. So I don't know how much Goddard I'm going to get, but I do think he's definitely in play. I think Jalen Hurts at quarterback's in play as well. Obviously, has that rushing touchdown upside, the rushing yard upside as well. What do you have, like 18 rushing attempts last week? So yeah, Hurts is definitely in play, as always, because he can get it done with his legs, and that is something I do like in terms of cash games. So anything sticking out to you on the Eagles side?
Well, Goddard, 3rd most owned tight end, $4,800. That's very good. The thing that's worrying me about Hurts, obviously he's getting the running. What really worries me is the receivers, because they're running the ball well. They're finally running the ball well, and if they're winning, so they're going to probably run the ball more. Of course, that helps Hurts somewhat, but he's not getting as much passing situation. So I think that hurts the receivers, but the tight end maybe doesn't hurt the tight end as much because he's a good dump-off guy. So I like Goddard. I've always liked Hurts. He's, I don't know what the whole thing was about the team not liking him or whatever it was. Fantasy-wise, Hurts has been great. He's the 4th most owned quarterback this week, 7.7%, which is, Actually, there's a nice level below. The top three are all double digits, and he's dropped down. So GPP wise, he's a little bit better than the top three quarterbacks. So I'm kind of staying away from the receivers right now. I got another 3 hours or 4 hours to decide, but I'm probably going to stay away from the receivers in DFS, except for Goddard.
Me too. I guess the problem I have with Hurts is who do you pair him with, and I guess the answer would be Goddard for me and nobody else. But interesting game there for sure. We'll keep moving on to the next game. We have Carolina going against Miami here. On the Carolina side, Christian McCaffrey obviously does stick out to me. He has 9,000, so he's not the most expensive running back on the entire slate. That would be Jonathan Taylor. But Christian McCaffrey is a guy that I'm very high on this week. I thought that maybe Cam Newton coming back hurts McCaffrey a little bit, but not really. He had 26.1 DraftKings points in Week 10. He had 24.9 in Week 11. We know for a fact that Newton's probably going to steal a touchdown here or there, but still, McCaffrey's getting a ton of targets, 18 targets in the last 2 weeks. Looks to be back to almost his normal workload at this point. Solid matchup against Miami as well. McCaffrey is somebody that is probably too cheap. He's somebody that was 9,900 in Week 2. He's currently 9,000, so I'm going to try to get as much of him as possible. Take advantage of this price tag because I think it's only going to keep going up week after week here. And then also Cam Newton, 5,600. I liked him last week as like a cheap play. He was 5,100 last week. He's now 5,600. So he was priced up a little bit, and he actually looked good. 27 passing attempts, 21 completions for a 77.8 completion rate, 189 yards, also had 2 passing touchdowns, and had a rushing touchdown as well, making it 2 weeks in a row with a rushing touchdown, might be 3 this week. So for me, it's Cam Newton and it's Christian McCaffrey on Carolina, and not much else sticks out.
Well, yeah, Newton's the number 2 owned quarterback. He produced 13.9%. He's just below Tom Brady and just above Justin Herbert. That the goal line carries, and it took a little bit away from McCarthy, but Christian McCaffrey, but McCaffrey still got the numbers. So, you look at McCaffrey, and that he's $100 less now. He's the second most owned, as you said. So just a little divergence here. Who would you go with, Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey? Taylor's $100 more. They're the top 2 owned running backs. Who would you go with this week?
Yeah, I'm personally going to go with
one.
Yeah, I'm personally going to go with Christian McCaffrey, just because of the better matchup, and then also with McCaffrey, you know that you're going to get like 10 targets a game, just about. So I think I'd go with McCaffrey, but I think both are in play, and we see that both are very high owned as well.
Yeah, and Miami's been having a tough time on defense. I think I'd rather play against Miami's defense than against Tampa Bay's defense, personally. And, I worry that Cam Newton's going to run the ball at the goal line, but the amount of pass catching of McCaffrey, even inside, the 10 zone, maybe balances that. But McCaffrey's been able to score points the last 2 weeks despite Cam Newton vulturing touchdowns. So I agree with you on that.
Yep, it's interesting. Cam Newton had 21 completions last week. 7 of them were to McCaffrey. That's 33%. That's pretty nuts.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Now, do you think DJ Moore is a playable? But he's $6,200 this week on DraftKings. He's 10th most owned. He's actually the 10th most owned receiver, 9.5%. I'm not really looking at him, but I guess you have to think about it.
Yeah, something to think about. Miami's defense, passing defense, has given up like the second most DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. I guess I'm just worried a little bit about the usage. 7 targets last week, 5 receptions, 16 DraftKings points. He was 5,900 last week. He's now 6,200. Yeah, I think he's fine, but again, I just worry about how much is he going to get used? How much is Cam Newton going to throw the ball? Because last week he only threw the ball like 27 times.
I agree. The guy hasn't had much practice, that is Cam Newton, and throwing the short passes, the red zone passes, and running the ball is probably what they're going to stick with. But that still Moore can catch some short balls and take them, and he has thrown a little bit to Robbie Anderson, who's 4,700 and 2.4%, and I actually haven't looked at his box scores last week, so I probably should do that before I even mention his name. But he's very low owned for a GPP crazy play.
Oh yeah, Robbie
Not
Anderson.
That I would agree with it, but you got to think about it.
He's been a disappointment this year, but yeah, with Cam Newton last week, 6 targets, 5 receptions. Yeah, he could be interesting. How long did you say it was?
Real quick, he's hold on a minute. I'm doing 2 things at the same time, and I can't do it. 2.4% owned is Robbie Anderson, so fairly low owned. And what did he do last week? He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 30 yards. So he had the 3rd most targets. Christian McCaffrey had 8. DJ Moore had 7. Anderson had 6 targets. So probably a lot more targets he's had all year before Cam Newton showed up. So, if you're looking to start a receiver for Carolina other than Christian McCaffrey, who's a running back, as a GPP play, maybe Robbie Anderson is something to consider.
Yeah, I like that call for sure. So that's on the Carolina side. On the Miami side, nothing really sticks out. I think Jalen Waddle's interesting, 5,100. Kind of a toughish matchup against Carolina. And then Myles Gaskin, I think, is interesting as well. Myles Gaskin is very cheap, 5,600. The matchup, again, is tough. Carolina's defense is pretty solid. But Gaskin had 23 carries last week, 89 yards, also had 4 targets, 3 receptions, so 26 touches. If you're going to give me 20-plus touches in your 5,600, I'll have to consider you. Actually got priced down 100 but from last week, but yeah, not a ton of interest in him, but he is a cheap guy that I did consider.
He's 10th most owned running back, 9.7%. Like you said, he came on a bit. Waddle's the 25th most owned wide receiver at 4.5%. And so tempting. Those are tempting situations. What about our good buddy Mike Gaseki? He's the 6th most owned tight end this week at 6.4%. Any interest in him against Carolina?
Yeah, I always like Gaseki. I guess my problem is there's guys that I like that are like 1,000 cheaper this week, so that's my only problem.
Okay, that'll be fun to look at here as we progress.
Yeah, but he's always solid, I think. But yeah, that ownership is very interesting on Waddle. I don't know why that is. Parker's still out. Fuller's out. He's the guy.
Yeah, is 5,900 a decent salary? Has he pretty much stayed the same?
Pretty much. I mean, he's went up about 300 from last week, but I think this is the most expensive he's been all year, actually.
Wow, how do you like that? Okay. 4.5% owned is Waddle right now.
Interesting for sure. But we'll keep moving on to the next game. We have Tennessee going against New England. Yeah, not a ton of interest on this game. I guess on the New England side, we have Harris and Stevenson are both questionable, but they both are expected to play. So that doesn't really open anything up there, and they're also pretty expensive. Harris 6,100, Stevenson 5,200. They both do play. Not any interest in either of them. If one of them do happen to be out, then I will have some interest. In terms of the wide receivers, I think Myers is interesting, 5,000. Tennessee has actually given up the most DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers all year, so really good matchup. Myers would be somebody I consider at 5K. Don't love it, though. And then on the Tennessee side, not a ton sticks out. We are missing McNichols. Of course, we lost Henry, so that leaves guys like Foreman, guys like Hilliard, guys like that I don't have a ton of interest in there. I think the wide receiver position is interesting for Tennessee because we see that Jones is on the IR. A.J. Brown is out, so who does that leave? It leaves guys like Westbrook, Akine, and then guys like Chester Rogers who are very cheap. Any interest in any of those guys?
Well, what's interesting about Dontrell Hilliard as a running back, and I didn't have it up here. I'm failing again in getting that up. He could catch the ball. And he is, I'm looking here, last week against the Texans, if you can use that as a data point, he had 10 targets, the most targets on the team, and had 8 catches for 47 yards. A.J. Brown had 9 targets. He's out. Westbrook had Acebrook, whatever how you say his name, Nick, had 8 targets for 7. So obviously Nick is a guy you should consider. But Hilliard, he could get those receptions again and get a little more yardage. And maybe he's a productive guy. Let's go take a look at his ownership. You think I would be ready for that? He is owned at 3.5%, $4,600. I think he's a tempting guy to play this week, personally.
Yeah, that's interesting. 10 targets last week, like you mentioned. I think that's solid there. No McNichols, yeah.
You look at these guys who can play, not play both positions, but I mean, he can catch the ball and he can run. They're going to mix up the running backs. He's going to get some running. I didn't mention how much running he got last week. He had 7 carries for 35, and Peterson had 9, who doesn't on the team. Deontay Foreman had 7, so they mixed it up pretty good. But Peterson is gone now. So Hilliard could get some of those, but if he continues to get the catches with A.J. Brown gone at that price, I think I got to get that guy in 1 or 2 lineups at least. That guy meaning Dontrell Hilliard. Hilliard.
Yes, solid call there, because they were it seemed like they were splitting carries 30%, 30%, 33%, like that. But now that Peterson's gone, no McNichols, maybe they'll do a 50-50 split.
Maybe he gets 50% of the carries and still gets enough passes, and maybe sneaks in the end zone for $4,600.
Yeah,
not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea at all. Any interest in these wide receivers? We have Westbrook, Akine, 4,000, Rodgers, 3,500. I mean, they got to throw the ball to somebody here.
I think Westbrook, Rodgers is good, but Westbrook got more of the targets last week and got the yardage last week against the Texans. So I think I would be tempted to go with Westbrook and Dontre is my 2 guys I'd like to try and sneak into GPPs. I'll probably stick one in a cash because I'm such a nut.
Yeah, I think it'd be Westbrook for me as well, but not a ton of interest. I actually really do like your Hilliard call there. Anything on the Patriots side that stuck out for me? It's pretty much Myers or nothing else. I don't want to get involved with the running backs there.
Yeah, the running back situation's tough. They're both questionable. The word is they're both probably going to start. And again, you got that situation with questionable players playing it. It's tough. That's a tough scenario. They're both fairly low owned. Stevenson's at 3.8%, and Harris is at 4.7%. Now let's see. That's an early game or a late game? I guess that's an early game.
Early game, yeah.
So you're gonna know what's going to happen. You're going to be able to make a decision, but Harris is, that's a tough one. It's just a tough one to play, and you need to, if you can find some stuff elsewhere, you probably ought to consider that. You just got to decide if Harris is going to be able to get the majority like he has been, but I don't like it. I'm painful. It's painful just talking about it.
It is painful.
Trying to predict that situation, especially with questionable. When we get to Atlanta, we talk about Patterson. We'll talk a little about that too. I'll remember because we'll talk about it. But yeah, questionable situations. Sometimes we kind of overlook it and forget about it. But sometimes guys are limited, and they're going to get limited snaps or limited carries or limited targets. And of course, with the New England Patriots, they do all sorts of crazy stuff. You just never know what they're going to do game to game.
You never know. Yep, for sure. But yeah, if either Harris or Stevenson are rolled out, I'll have interest in the other guy. But yeah, that's about it for this game. We'll move on to the next. We have Pittsburgh going against Cincinnati. On the Pittsburgh side, a couple guys do stick out. I think Najee Harris is interesting, 8,200. Definitely up there on the expensive side, but he's been getting a lot of touches as of late. Prior to last week, he had 5 games in a row with 20-plus rushing attempts, which is pretty huge. And, of course, he is involved heavily in the passing game as well. So Harris is somebody that does stick out. Solid matchup against Cincinnati there. I think Dante Johnson is interesting, 6,600. averaging 18.1 DraftKings points per week. I think this guy is very underrated. Had 13 targets in the last 2 weeks, 26 targets combined there, 26.1 DraftKings points last week, a solid matchup against Cincy. And then also Pat Freiermuth, who is 4,300. Yes, I do like Freiermuth quite a bit. Ben Roethlisberger seems to really like this guy. He's had, 16 targets in the last 2 weeks combined. Had 6 targets in week 9, 7 in week 8, 7 in week 6. So he's been heavily used. 5 touchdowns on the year as well for Freiermuth, and I do like the price tag. So those 3 guys are the guys I'm looking at on Pittsburgh.
Yeah, those are some solid calls. It's really neat to see the rookie tight end doing so well. That's not for Atlanta. Just being me. You won't believe this, but Najee Harris is the 15th most owned running back at 5.8%. God,
wow.
Got to get him some GP lineups, wouldn't you think? It's a huge matchup this week, a very important game for both these teams, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. Did you have the over and under on that? And I don't know if I care, because I think Najee Harris is a very important guy to get in a GPP, and obviously Cash is there too.
Off the top of my head, I don't, but
anyway, Dante Johnson obviously has been great. They've been missing Juju for the rest of the year, so the only problem with Dante Johnson is Freiermuth, or whatever is how you pronounce his name, has been taking a lot of targets and taking a lot of goal line targets away. But I still think all 3 of those guys are great plays this week.
Oh yeah, and he's cheap as well. And 5 touchdowns, and we see that Eric Ebron is ruled out as well, so that does help.
Yeah, I think Eric actually got put on IR, so you got a clear path there for Freiermuth to play for the next several games.
Oh yeah, for sure. The total was 43.5, so kind of low total there.
Yeah, that hurts a little bit, but I still like these guys with that total. Maybe the total will get busted a little bit.
Yeah, that ownership on Harris is very interesting. But as far as the Cincinnati side, I think Jamar Chase is interesting as always. 7,300, having a phenomenal year there. He's definitely okay. The only problem is I don't love the price tag. This is going to be, looks like the second most expensive he's been all year at 7,300, which is crazy because week 1 he was 4,800. So getting a little bit up there for my liking. And then T. Higgins is somebody that I did not mind last week, kind of busted a little bit. Only 3 targets, 2 receptions. I don't mind going back to him. Same price as last week, very cheap. Typically getting a lot of targets. Like I said, only 3 last week, but I feel like he could bounce back here a little bit. But not a ton of interest on the Cincy side. I think Burrow's interesting, 6,200. Mixon's always in play, but nobody that's really intriguing to me. So anybody you like on Cincy here?
Well, I've been a little annoyed that Higgins can't score a bleeping touchdown.
Yep.
I've got him in one of my leagues is a basic scoring league, which means only touchdowns. I started the league in 1981, before you were born, I'm assuming. Wow. And I can't get him to change the rules. I like the guy. Every time I think about him, I think about that league. But anyway, I'm playing games. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know if this guy's going to score a touchdown the rest of the year. I'm going to make that prediction. T. Higgins is not going to score a touchdown the rest of the year. Ooh. That means start him this week in your DFS, because I'm always wrong. Burrow's worrying me a little bit. Whenever I love Burrow. I think that guy's a fantastic quarterback. He's the 11th most owned quarterback this week, 3.45%. Nobody trusts this guy. He's gotten hit a lot. He's gotten a little dinged up. So he's a tempting guy to play. What bugs me about it is, what worries me, Pittsburgh, whatever. It's a low total. Whenever I think of him, I like to start him. But then you got guys like Hurts, who, he's a little higher. He's about $1,100 more, that is going to run the ball. It's going to get frosting on the cake. He's going to have the chance to get 50 yards and maybe sneak in a touchdown, where Burrow's not going to do that. So you gotta believe. Of course, he's cheaper, so that helps. anyway, so I'm a little confounded by it. I like the guy, but I'm not so sure. Is there better quarterbacks that are about the same price or not? I'm not so sure. By the way, I forgot to mention, I don't really like mentioning this, but I'm going to mention it. Tyrod Taylor is only $5,300, which compared to Burrows is $900 less, playing against the Jets. He's a running quarterback. He has good and bad weeks. So you could save some money there if you wanted to go away from those other ones. And I apologize if I forgot to mention that before. So obviously I'm confounded about that. I'm not sure where to go there. But certainly Chase is the guy who has been doing well, but you're obviously going to have to pay the extra salary to put him in as opposed to Higgins.
Yep, the price tag is what's getting me there, because for $300 less, I can go and get, Chris Godwin, who's probably one of the best wide receiver plays on the slate, right? So
that's
where
a good
I'm
point.
kind of.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, so a little too expensive, but yeah, and like you mentioned, Burrow. I mean, I like the guy as well, but he's just so inconsistent. And yeah, I'd rather go up and get guys like a Hurts, or go down and get like a Taylor, like you said. So yeah, not a ton of interest in this Bengals offense, but my interest is more on the Pittsburgh side.
Yeah, those are some good plays. Should be a great game, and let's hope it's a close one, and they break that 40 over/under a little bit, and we get a little more scoring on that game.
Oh yeah, for sure. Cannot wait for that game there. But we'll move on to the next game. We have Atlanta going against Jacksonville. On the Jacksonville side, I think James Robinson's very interesting. We take a look at Robinson, and he looks like he has played or scored in every single game this year outside of the game in Week 8 where he did get hurt. So he has 7 touchdowns on the year. Last week, 12 rushing attempts. He had 3 targets as well, scored a touchdown. He's 6,200, and he's going against Atlanta. So, yeah, don't mind me some James Robinson here at that price tag. Seems really cheap, and I love the matchup as well. I'm trying to take a look here. Jacksonville is it's not showing up. Okay, Jacksonville is 29th against the rush, so that's like the 4th highest giving up points in the whole league, which is a great matchup for Robinson here. Very cheap as well. And then also we are missing Agnew, got put on the IR. I think that opens up some things for guys like Chenault, who's 4,400, but I guess most of my interest does come from James Robinson here. I think he has a great matchup. I think he's cheap, and he scores touchdowns in a lot of them.
Yeah, he's had some issues with his knee and his I forget what it was, his heel. But maybe you can that was some of these things worry me, where we don't really understand, even not on the injury report that I can see. So he's definitely a very tempting guy going up against San Francisco. Now, I think that's a good play. I just worry about that a little bit, but that's what we worry about. But he catches a couple balls too, so hopefully he can sneak one in the end zone.
Yep.
So I like that.
And then, that's about it for me for this game. Is anything sticking out to you on the Atlanta side? I knew you wanted to talk about Patterson a little bit. He's questionable.
Yeah. Now Patterson, as we talked about, he's injured. He's questionable. He's a true game time decision today. Let's say they play him. I worry about his ability to cut despite him playing. They're desperate for people. They're desperate for players, offensive skill position players. So, they're probably going to get him out there, period, even if he's 70, 80%. But what does that do to you in your DFS lineup? Is he really going to get the points? Now, what's interesting, one of the words is they may put Chenault in the backfield a little bit and do what Debo did in the last couple of weeks, and maybe he gets to run the ball a little bit. You never know. That may add the value to Chenault. And as you said, Agnew's out. I think that's on IR. So, Chenault may be a guy you may want to consider given that situation.
Yep, I don't hate him. Price tag's cheap. Another guy that does stick out a little bit, Dan Arnold, who put up 0 last week, but a much better matchup here against Atlanta. But I do like Freiermuth more. I do like Gronk more. That'd be the only problem. But he's the other guy that I would consider if there weren't.
He'd be a punt position, but I don't know his salary off the top of my head.
Yeah, he's like 4,000.
So he's not really a punt position per se.
Yeah, he got priced down 100 from last week. I think he's interesting. Prior to last week, he's been doing really well, but had an off week against San Francisco, who is pretty good against tight ends.
Now,
Yeah,
interesting point, if I may interrupt you, I apologize.
good.
Chenault is the 15th most owned receiver, which I think is kind of high at 6.8%. And maybe it's because of the things we've been talking about, the lack of receivers, and maybe they're going to run them a little bit. I don't know if that news is really out there or whether they're really going to act. A lot of times they talk, the teams talk, and then they don't do what they say they're going to do. But he's a fairly, 15th most owned wide receiver. That's higher than I expected.
Yeah, that's higher than I expected as well.
And Russell Gage is the 16th owned. Chenault's $4,400. Russell Gage is $5,100 for Atlanta, playing in the same game. So get a little feel there. Gage a little more expensive.
Yeah, the problem with Gage is he's so inconsistent that it's crazy how inconsistent this guy is.
Yeah, it's difficult to predict him.
Like,
Let me go look
week,
real quick at James Robinson right now is the 4th most owned running back at 12.9%. Very high owned running back right there.
Yeah, he's up there. I thought he'd be a little bit lower owned than that.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh, yeah. Anything else stick out to you in this game?
Those are the ones, Patterson's the 11th most owned running back for Atlanta, 7.8%. And, of course, he's been phenomenal. It's been great what he's done, and they're desperate. But is he going to play? If he plays, because he's a true game time decision. Is that an early game? I'm pretty sure that's an early game, so we're going to know.
That's the last early game on the slate.
Yes. Pardon?
Yeah, it was the last early game on the slate.
So, you're going to know. You're going to know if he's active. But even though he's active, you have to ask yourself, what percentage is he going to play, and how able is he going to play and produce against Jacksonville? Of course, he's great because he catches and he runs, so that worries me a little bit about Patterson.
Yep, I'm with you there. But we'll move on to the next game. We have 3 left. These are the 4 o'clock games. So we have the Chargers going against the Broncos, and most of my interest does come from the Chargers side. Justin Herbert looks to be the quarterback I'm going to this week. It's between Herbert, Hurts, and then going down low with Cam Newton. But yeah, I really do like Herbert here. He's he's consistent, averaging 25 DraftKings points per game. Solid matchup against Denver. He's going to throw the ball and throw it a lot. I think his price tag's very intriguing. He got priced down from last week 100. He was 6,700 in week 11. He was actually 7,300 in week 10, 7,000 in week 9. So this is the cheapest we are seeing Herbert since week 4 against the Raiders. So yeah, your cheap price tag here for Herbert. Solid matchup. I don't mind it at all. And then Austin Eckler, 8,400. Definitely on the more expensive side, but he's been looking really good. 22.5 DraftKings points on average. Had 41.5 DraftKings points last week. But I think what I'm going to be doing this week is stacking up Herbert with Keenan Allen, who has 7,400. Really like Keenan Allen this week. He's somebody that you can always count on for 10 plus targets. He's had 10 plus targets the last 4 or 5 weeks, averaging 17.9 DraftKings points. Only 2 touchdowns on the year. I guess that'd be my only concern, but I think Keenan Allen's in a solid spot here. So Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, but I really do like that Herbert-Allen stack this week.
Yeah, I'm glad to see Herbert's salary sneak down a little bit, give you a few more $100 to play with. Now, Mike Williams got that sneaky touchdown at the end of the game last week, but he really hasn't been doing much. And I heard one of the announcers a couple of weeks ago kind of talk about his knee, maybe the team's maybe he's got a bit of a knee problem and they're not talking about it. Now, maybe there's been more about that than I haven't noticed. So that makes me feel more confident in Keenan Allen, even though Williams got that late touchdown, which was kind of a fluky thing with the broken coverage. Mm-hmm. But it sure was pretty, and it sure was clutch at the end of the game for both him and Herbert. And nice to see Herbert. Herbert's a great play. I really like that play. I just can't believe how good this guy is as a second-year quarterback. It's really great to see.
Yeah, he's really
solid. Eckler's been insane. You're going to have to pay for it. And, maybe he's not going to – he's just getting everything. He's gotten everything. He's an 8th most owned running back, 10.5%, but you're paying for it.
Yep, for sure. He's like McCaffrey. He's like a McCaffrey a little bit. He's going to go out there and get, around – he had, 7 targets last week, 6 week before. Going to catch the ball, going to run the ball, going to score 13 touchdowns on the year. Very impressive for Austin Eckler. But yeah, a lot of interest on this Chargers side. But in terms of like running it back on the Denver side, not a ton is sticking out. I mean, the Chargers are really bad against the tight end, but you have to choose between Font or Albert O. Just a very tough situation there. Chargers are great against the wide receivers. You have Judy, you have Sutton. I don't hate Sutton 5,400. And then you have to choose between Melvin Gordon or Williams, both around the same price tag. So it's really hard for me to find a nice run back option on the Broncos. Anybody you like on the Broncos that really sticks out?
It's funny, you mentioned 3 different skill positions for Denver, and you got situations where you have splits going on. Sutton hasn't really performed very well since Judy came back. Judy's been kind of taking the number 1 role. Interesting enough, though, Judy is 5,500 and Sutton is what, 5,400. So to take Judy, if you think he's still got the hot hand, you're only paying an extra $100. So that to me is tempting. I like Sutton. I've always liked Sutton, but the reality is Judy now is the guy who most likely, and he is the most owned. He's of the 2, he's the 13th most owned receiver at 7.6%, where Sutton is 37th at 3.3%. So Sutton would sure be a tempting GPP play. And like you said, the tight end just baffles me. They're both talented players. I like Fant, but Albert O just steals too much. He's only the 36th most owned tight end right now, Albert O, at 0.5%. So, but then you got Fant stealing from him, and same thing with the running backs. So those are difficult plays. They're not very obvious. The good thing about it, if you go down into the running backs, Javon Williams, 29th most owned at 3%. And Melvin Gordon, 31st owned at 3.0%. So you're getting cheaply owned running backs, but you kind of have to throw a dart at it and maybe decide who you think is going to be the one who gets the most carries.
Yeah, tricky situation. But yeah, Judy, nice call there. 9 targets last week or week 10, and he had 8 targets in week 9. So yep, he is.
He's hot.
Yep,
and he's the same price. He's basically the same price. So at least that choice as far as the receiver may be easier, by the easiest choice I see on that team right now to play players in DFS.
Yep, makes sense. And he's cheap as well, so yeah, don't hate that. But we have 2 games left. We have the Rams, Packers, and Minnesota, San Francisco. We'll start with the Rams, Packers here. On the Green Bay side, yeah, this is a situation where I wish this was a 1 o'clock game here. We have Aaron Jones, who's questionable. Looks to be a game time decision, so yeah, that doesn't really help us out a lot. But I guess what's interesting is these guys, Jones and Dillon, are about the same price. So what you could do is put Jones in your lineup if he does play. You could write it out because $6K for Aaron Jones is way too cheap. I'm looking through it; it's going to be the cheapest he has been all year. So I don't mind doing that. And then if he is out, you can easily just put in A.J. Dillon, who, if Jones is out, A.J. Dillon at 5,900 is going to be a smash spot. But it's a tricky situation where I wish this game was at 1 o'clock. It'd help us out a lot more.
Yeah, $100 difference. That's an excellent situation, though. If you don't mind the obvious, if Aaron Jones is out, you can play Dillon at $100 cheaper. Probably can't change your lineup much, but maybe there's something else you could switch, but they're almost identical. If Aaron's is playing, then you probably play Aaron, but yeah, I like that, though. At least you have that option. If you want to take that ride into the second games, I think that's an excellent option to attempt to do. Because like you said, Aaron's a good play, and that's his ownership right now. Of course, if he's playing, his ownership will probably sneak up a little bit, but his ownership is at 13. Well, he's 6.5. He's still fairly well owned.
Yeah, it's tempting. I think not a lot of people will try to do that, so that's something I'm going to be looking at doing. And then also Davante Adams is way too cheap, 8,600. Yeah, this price tag doesn't really make much sense. This is a guy that should be 9K. He had 8 targets, 7 receptions for 115 yards, 2 touchdowns last week, 33.5 DraftKings points, averaging 21.2 DraftKings points this year. So yeah, I think Davante Adams is somebody that I'm going to try to get to. My problem this week is there's a lot of running backs that I like that are expensive, like McCaffrey, guys like that. But yeah, Davante Adams, if I can get him, I will. So those are the guys I'm looking at on the Packers side. On the Rams side, the price tag on Cooper Kupp is just, it's nuts, 9,600. But I think it is warranted. He was 9,300 last week, 13 targets, 11 receptions, 122 yards, 26.2 DraftKings points. He just keeps on getting it done. He has not had a game under 10 DraftKings points. The last time he scored under 20 was in Week 5 against Seattle. So, yeah, what do you think of this Cooper Kupp price tag? 9,600, most expensive player on the slate.
Wow. He's the 8th most owned wide receiver at 10%. I think that's hurting him a little bit on the ownership, but not a ton. But still, it's hurting him. Wow. You're at Green Bay. Boy, that's a tough one. I don't know what the over and under is. Green Bay, the Devontae Adams may be being hit by the Aaron Rodgers toe effect, and they're worried about that, which makes you think maybe Green Bay may run the ball more, which will slow the game down and maybe not give Kupp as many targets, which worries me a little bit. I don't know if it should worry me a lot. I think he's still got to consider playing him a significant percentage of time, but I'm kind of a scary guy. I don't like high-dollar players, which is really stupid. So I think you shouldn't get too scared of that. I think you should still consider playing him maybe slightly less, but still play him. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, the price tag's up there. It makes it hard to get him in lineups.
Maybe they'll all be guarding Odell Beckham because he definitely needs double coverage. That was a joke, by the way.
That is a good joke.
Sorry. I'm so tired of that guy.
Oh yeah, I know. Trust me. Especially as a Browns fan. As a Browns fan, you gotta. Not a big fan of him, but MVS Scantling here is 4,100. And he's very cheap. Last week he had 10 targets, 4 receptions, 123 yards, averaged 30.8 yards per catch. And he has that boom upside where he can go for a long touchdown on any given game. 25.3 DraftKings points last week. I think Scantling is interesting at that price tag.
I agree. That's a great price tag for both cash or GPPs. 5.6% owned, the 21st most owned wide receiver. And like you said, he's boom or bust. His floor is low. But they're going to be, he gets opportunities because they're going to be over attacking Devontae Adams. And we just got to decide whether we think Aaron Rodgers is going to be okay with that broken toe. He hasn't really practiced the whole week. So that is tempting, though. $4,100 is a very nice price.
Yep, he was the other guy that I was looking at. Anything else stick out to you in this game?
No, that's about it. It's just going to be really difficult decisions with Aaron Jones because I think they're going to want to try and run the ball more than typical. And, we've got to sit down here and decide, is this guy really – I hate questionable. I hate last decisions. Dillon has played well. He can catch the ball. So it wouldn't surprise me that Aaron plays and they balance it even more because he's not 100% per se. So that scenario concerns me as far as playing Aaron Jones because they're going to probably run the ball. Maybe they run it enough that both of them are productive. So something to think about.
And another thing is the Packers have a bye next week. You'd think they would just rest Jones here, get that bye, and then have Jones come back, week 14, right?
Totally agree. And if you're in a position like you mentioned, you got an excellent scenario since they're both about the same price, Dillon and Jones, and you could go into the late game and make that switch to Dillon if they do that, and maybe there's a higher probability they do that because of the bye week. They need to win. They've been falling. They need this win. But they got to think of the whole season. And if Aaron is really hurt and they got that bye week, they could just put Dillon in there, and maybe they could still win this game. Dillon's been playing well. So that's an excellent idea that you came up with earlier. I like it.
Yep, for sure. If I was a coach, I would rest Jones here, but I'm not a coach, so we'll see what they choose to do. We'll find out in a couple hours there. But we'll move on to the last game. Minnesota going against San Francisco on the Minnesota side. I actually really like Dalvin Cook this week. He is 8,100. which does seem pretty cheap. You're getting a nice savings off of guys like McCaffrey. You're getting a nice savings off of guys like Jonathan Taylor. Maybe not the most upside of those guys, but, he had 22 carries last week against Green Bay, 24 carries in week 10 against the Chargers as well. 4 and 5 targets in his last 2 weeks. So, yeah, getting some targets. He's cheap-ish in terms of Dalvin Cook. 22.5 DraftKings points last week, looking solid there, averaging 17.8 per week. I think Dalvin Cook is somebody that I don't mind at all. Taking a look at it, and the San Francisco is 18th in terms of DraftKings points given up against the running back. And then as far as the wide receivers, I think Jefferson's always in play, 8,300, but there are some guys I do like more that are cheaper. But he's having an absolutely phenomenal year, and it's also a pretty solid matchup there. So those would be the kind of 2 guys I'm looking at for Minnesota. And then on the San Francisco side, Deebo Samuel's been looking phenomenal all year. He is 7,900. I like him quite a bit. And he is, and then also Brandon Ayuk's interesting, 5,300. Brandon Ayuk looks to, finally be coming together. Earlier in the year, I expected a lot more from him. Kind of started the year out extremely slow. Through week 7, he only had 1 game over 10 DraftKings points, but since week 8, he has scored at least 10 DraftKings points in 3 out of the 4 games, including a 21.5 DraftKings points performance last week against Jacksonville. So those are kind of the guys I'm looking at. Any interest in those guys at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Deebo is just incredible what he's doing, and the frosting on the cake is the being able to run. He's just I can't believe this guy. He's just been phenomenal. He's the 3rd most owned wide receiver, $7,900, 19% owned. But Brandon's coming back. He's playing better. He's at $5,300 at 12% owned, the 7th owned. So, he's kind of tempting to save that money on that team. But I don't think you're going to slow down Deebo. And the question is there going to be enough there? And is there going to be a high enough scoring where Deebo won't suck out all the receiving points and leave Eiuk? But Eiuk is very tempting at that salary. That's a low salary. I like your idea about Dalvin Cook. By the way, one guy I forgot to mention was Darrell Henderson for the Rams. He's only 5,800, and he is really high owned. He's the 3rd most owned running back. So, yeah, those are very good. You said you liked the tight end also? No, you didn't talk about the tight end, sorry.
No, I think Kittle's fine, 6,400, but I'd rather save a couple thousand and get like a Freiermuth or get like a Gronk. But yeah, Kittle's definitely in play.
6,400. And Kittle is the 4th most owned tight end, and Evans is the 5th, ironically, what we talked about before. So, yeah, Ayuk's tempting. And, of course, Deebo Samuel is solid. He's so solid with his scoring, his consistency. You're just going to have to pay $7,900 to get him. Minnesota's been playing better, but that doesn't mean we won't have a semi-high scoring game. And Mitchell's supposed to be back for San Francisco. So, but and that's a late game. He's questionable. I forget. I should have looked that up to know what the injury situation is. So,
I think Mitchell's playing, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, let me go look that up here. He is questionable. It's tough to tell. Very reports indicate. So our report from Casey Joyner on the Football Diehards site is still a mixed bag with Mitchell, and it's an afternoon game. He's questionable, and there's variant reports on that. So, crap. We don't necessarily particularly know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I babbled on that one. I apologize. I'm not sure. But it's an interesting decision between Deebo and Eiuk. I think that I love Deebo, obviously. I mean, you can't not love him. It's just that can you save enough money on Eiuk if you're talking about those 2 guys in general? Can you save enough money on Eiuk, and you can save a lot of money to make something up somewhere else that you really want to play? And that's the decision you're going to have to make.
Yeah, for sure. I think both guys are interesting, for sure. But yeah, that's about it for all the games. I do want to touch on defense real quick here. We didn't talk about a lot of defenses. The Texans defense going against the Jets, I think, are very interesting because the Jets are the Jets. The only problem is Houston's defense is not great, but they're 2,300. So I think that's going to be the defense I go to this week. I also, don't hate the Jaguars at minimum price against Atlanta. So I think I'm just going to be punting down with those two.
Yeah, Houston is the number one owned defense at 11%, $2,300. And Jacksonville is the number 3 owned at 2,200. Then Carolina's stuck in between them at number 2 at $3,100. So, boy, those are cheap defenses. And they have potential. Atlanta makes mistakes. The Jets will make mistakes. And you just need a couple of mistakes to make a few points on defense. And the $2,300, $2,200 is just a bargain. Well, that's hard to get off those two. That's for sure.
Yeah, I love punting down a defense. It seems to work out more often than not. I'm happy with give me 5, 6, 7 DraftKings points and allow me to go up at other positions and pay up there.
Yeah, we love punting, and this is a good week to punt at defense.
Yep, for sure. But yeah, any other final thoughts on the slate you want to mention? I think we went through about everything.
Yeah, we went through everything. I mentioned Tyrod Taylor for Houston. He scares me, but I kind of like the guy. He runs the ball. We like to look at these running quarterbacks who can get some yardage and maybe sneak a touchdown. He's 5,300. I'm not in love with him, but you're always looking for some bargain that you can put in at any position, and then it allows you to play a high-priced player. And he's the kind of guy to do that. And, of course, I mentioned Elijah Moore. These are risky picks that we talked about earlier. James Robinson with his knee issue may not be as big of an issue that I'm worried about, and obviously he's been the guy for Jacksonville. So, and of course Dante Hilliard we talked about. Anyway, I'm babbling again, but I have anything really new. We've talked about all those, so got some good decisions to make here in the next couple of hours.
Yep, sounds good. I need to get to some making lineups myself. Good luck to everybody out there. We'll be back, as always, on Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and then back always on a Sunday, 10 o'clock in the morning with Jamie. Should be back by then. But, great job today, Emil. It was fun talking with you. Good luck this Sunday.
Yes, all you also. Have a great Sunday at